All right, so let's do a walkthrough with Fusion. If you've already got, if you haven't gotten it all loaded on a computer, work on that. If you do, follow along. So let me hop over to Fusion, share screen, over to Fusion. So this is the general Fusion environment. Now, one of the main things you're going to notice is with Fusion, you don't see a lot of tools. And the whole point is Fusion is designed around being able to be available and more accessible to not necessarily beginners, but certainly could be for beginners, but more of intermediate to advanced users. Yes, there are far more powerful programs even within the Autodesk family, but the idea is there's not that many tools available because the tools available are meant to be intuitive, meaning they don't want to overwhelm you with way too many tools at one go, so that you get overwhelmed with everything. So within these, like your sketches and such like that, if you go into that, the tool environment will open all the relative tools. Now, one of the other things that I really like about Fusion as an introductory program, if you mouse over any of the tools, it will bring up this pop-up bar or pop-up window and give you both an explanation and a little illustration, just so you understand what this thing is that you're mousing over. So I highly recommend just kind of point and rest over anything and just see what happens. Now, there's a variety of different tools, and we're going to go over those in a minute. But the most important thing is I want to start you off with how you access your files and save your files. Now, one of the main things is while you can save your files locally, onto your computer, onto a thumb drive, stuff like that, if you really want to, that is unnecessary. The reason Fusion is developed the way it is it's meant to be used as a team working tool, or it's geared toward that. What that means is multiple people can either access or even work on the same project remotely. Other thing is that you can access your files from any computer that has Fusion 360. You can, if the computer or if the program's already loaded, you can sign in on your account. Bam, you've got access to all your files. So what that means is you save your projects, your files, and it is stored on the internet, cloud, any of those words. Now, what happens if you don't have internet connection? It will save your file locally on your computer until it has access to a connection, and then it will update the online version. Same thing goes for if you don't have access and you're trying to get a file. Unfortunately, yes, you're going to be a little out of luck that day. So that means, hey, break day. I can't do anything, boss. Pay me for being here anyway. So, yeah, there. All right. So first thing, upper left-hand corner, this little matrix button, show data panel. This is where you can shift from your personal files to our team files. Now, I sent out invitations to everybody that sent me their email. Anybody else, we'll send those later. You have your own personal files, and with this little drop down here, you can see it as a team account. I have my personal, single user storage, and the team account. Just click on those and it will bring up your own files and such. Back and forth, I got my own stuff. Go back to our shared team, specifically our current team, specifically the 2004 Spring Bridgewater class. Now, as we go along, this folder will contain more folders. You will save your projects within that folder. Make sure that you are titling your files properly. Yes, it'll still say that it is from your account. Make sure that you put your last name and dot hyphen whatever the actual project file. So this one, last name, keychain. There you go. Just that we keep it everybody separate and know what's going on. Now, one quick thing. Fusion does not allow you to transfer files between teams, unfortunately. If you build something on your team, or on your own personal account, and you need to upload it onto our shared account, you will have to download the file onto the computer and then re-upload it onto onto our team account. One of the problems there is it doesn't save all the information. What I mean by that is when I open one of these projects, and we'll explain this more here in a few, but Fusion saves history points. You can cycle back and forth in history, so you can make adjustments, all that sort. When you download a file and upload it again, it doesn't save that information, unfortunately. So you'll end up with one version, or or I've confused myself entirely, and it does save the history, but not that. Anyway, one of the other things that it allows for is you have multiple versions. So you do not have to make different versions of the same file. Now, if you're going to make major changes to your project, like, all right, I'm not sure if I want it to have, rubber ducky or, I don't know, super cougar, eagle, falcon bird. I don't know. If you want to change it that much, yeah, you might want to save it in two different files. But otherwise, what it will do is it will save multiple versions. So you also don't have to save your files as last one, no, really, this is the final version, version 5. It'll save each iteration, and you can cycle back to each one if need be. So you have that as an option. But I recommend, if you're working on a project for this class, just save it to our team folder anyway. You might as well. Save your own stuff for making your own stuff. All right. So there you go. You start a project. What is the first thing you should do anytime you start a new project? Save. Save, please, save. Fusion will automatically save your work, but if you don't begin with an actual dedicated saved file, it will only save it into the crash file cache. So if it doesn't have a dedicated place to save, you really run the risk of, if it crashes, it overloads, you lose power, whatever, you lose all of your work. So first thing, save. So to do that, you can either, of course, go to File or the save icon, or Control, or if you're on Apple, Command S, save. There you go. So it's in the folder already. We'll say example something. Now title changes up. Open up the data panel. We have example something. There's nothing there to report yet. There's nothing. It's an empty file, so there's nothing out there yet. Eventually it'll show a version and all that kind of stuff. But save your project. Otherwise, it will automatically save. You can always save manually, and when you do save manually, that's when the different versions are marked, and you can note, it'll give you the prompt to give you little notes. So if you want to add notes to each version that's saved, that's the best way to do it. So like I said, the whole thing is, it's really geared around you being able to develop a project. It's not just about like finishing something. It's developed around being able to go back and make alterations at any point in the project's history. All right. So all well and good. How do I see what I'm doing? So just so I have a frame of reference, I'm just going to create a cube, just so we have, and it's not even in the center. Doesn't matter. I just want to be able to have something to look at, so we can see as I move things around. So two major ways of moving around and looking at your project. On the top right-hand corner, you have this view cube. View cube has a home button. You can click, hold, and drag on that cube and tumble it around, and you can see the relative X, Y, and Z axes there. So that's why we went over that stuff. Or you can just click directly on any one thing. If you need to rotate the whole project, as you mouse over the view cube, you will see the arrows show up, and you can click that. Otherwise, down at the bottom of your screen, you have the click commands. So these are really there for if you don't have a mouse. So you have your orbit, click there. Now the orbit tool comes up, click and drag, and you got that. Hit escape to get out of the tool. Next one, look at, allows you to select, and it will snap to that view, to that face. If it's a rounded object or something, it'll do the best it can. Hit escape to get out. Pan is a little hand, move around. Like I said before, if you have a mouse, pan is press and hold the mouse wheel. You pan, just moves it, just slides back and forth around two axes. Press and hold shift and then the mouse wheel. That's how you orbit. Hit F6 and it'll resize. Hit the home button, it'll come back to a 3/4 view. Zoom is handled by either the mouse wheel, out and in, or obviously click the little, really, the word fell out of my head, not microphone, microscope. Magnifying glass? Thank you. Good God, magnifying glass. The little arrow key comes up, and you can just mouse click and hold, hit escape to get out of that. Uh, Fit, that's the F6 key. You have your other display settings. Now, this is especially important if you just like the screen hurts your eyes. You have different options. You have visual style. This is for like either just gets rid of all your edges. You just see it as a shaded object. With hidden edges, this kind of gets a little like optical illusion because you can see both sides from everything. It makes it brings the opacity down a bit. Uh, I usually default to shaded with visible edges so I can see what I'm looking at, but I can't see through the thing. And obviously you got a whole bunch of versions. You can go through the same options with wireframe if you want. Oops, Control Z deleted everything instead of just goes back to what I had before. And as you can see, there's also hotkey options. So Control 6 brings it back to that one. There you go. Grid and snaps. This just allows you to turn on and off like the grid. Snaps, meaning like anything you move will move along in increments depending on the grid. You can set the grid increments, that sort. The other option is viewports. Now, a lot of CAD software, and if you learn drafting techniques or anything like that, which is what CAD developed from, multiple views is your standard view. These are called orthogonal views. You are looking at any object from a singular direction, but without the parallax of like the way we see with binocular vision. You're not looking at a thing with kind of being able to see around it. You're seeing it only one single view at a time. So I'm looking at from the top, from the front, from the side, and perspective view up here. Sometimes this is really helpful for developing objects that you're trying to make in multiple directions at once. There you go. If you prefer to work this way, more power to you. This is the way I traditionally would work, but I have kind of grown accustomed to working with the just the default view, which is just the perspective view. The hotkey is hold Shift and 1. Toggle back and forth between there. You also have color views. As you're working, you can press Shift N, Shift November. It goes to auto color. It just assigns a color to what you're working on. This is important when you're working on different components. It'll automatically color them differently, just so you could differentiate what you're working on. The default view is appearance mode, and it's giving a kind of steel color to it. And that's literally what the appearance is. If you press A, it brings up the appearance tool. We'll talk about this later. But satin steel. So this is where you can apply all kinds of different colors and such. So if you want it to look like gold or brick or cloth or glass or whatever. And depending on what the color is or the appearance is, if your computer can't handle it, it can get real wonky real fast. So if you're unsure, and for the first couple projects, I would leave it in auto color mode, Shift N, makes things a little bit easier to deal with. All right. So that's how you navigate. That's how you see all that kind of fun. So what am I looking at? Well, first thing is you have your, down here, you have your time slider. There's only one item there. I created this cube, this solid. Your main toolbar is for solids. There's a variety of different tools. There's a variety of different options, and some of them kind of overlap, or they have the same tool in a different method. So right now, solids means it's like I'm working on a singular solid object. If I cut it in half, the thing would be just two solid objects in half. Not like if it were a surface, which is the next set of tools. These in orange, it'll look like if you cut it in half, it would be hollow because it's just the surfaces. We're going to go through some of this stuff, but for the most part, we're going to be sticking with the solid workspace. You also have a drop down here called design, or where it says design. This is where you have a variety of different options. Things like generative design. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. That's like using AI generation to help develop an object. That is an extension in Fusion right now, and unfortunately, with an education license, that is a paid service, so we probably won't deal with that. Rendering is making the thing really look like what it's supposed to. So when you're putting on that like satin steel and oak and platinum, it kind of looks the part in the design workspace, but in render, that's where you bring an object to its full digital representation with those materials. Ideally, I doubt we're going to get to any of these other ones. Animation, that's where if you have a complex mechanism, you can actually make it animate. You can create exploded views. So if you're making an object, you wanted to blow it apart and make it look neat, like it's, seeing all the different spots or different parts. There you go. Same thing with simulation and manufacturing. This is actually a direct output for CAM, computer aided manufacturing. This is, you could take from Fusion and directly send it to a milling machine, a lathe, any kind of that kind of stuff, and have it machine it out for you. Obviously, it's not just hit a magic button and it creates something. You got to know what you're doing there, and also have access to that kind of equipment. So anyway, we're going to be sticking with pretty much, for the most part, solid workspace, the design workspace. The last thing here is the browser tree, or I often call it, and I just lost internet connection. So that's what will happen. And I don't know if yep, Zoom is still recording, so we'll see. All right. So that's what will happen if you lose connection. All right. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see what the video looks like later. Might just me with some frozen scrambly head. The other thing here that will expand as you're working is the browser tree, your project tree. I often call it the hierarchy tree because that is the hierarchy of tools and such. So as I said before, bodies are solid bodies or physical things within the virtual space. Body one is that guy. Origin is currently hidden, so you have your view toggle, the little eyeball either hidden with a cross in it or across, or the solid. Bring it back on. Let me hide the bodies. Yes, that's never not funny to me, so I'm always going to laugh, and we're going to continue using that. Your origin is the very center of the virtual workspace, center of the three axes, center of the planes, and you have your representation of both the axes with red, green, and blue. Got them that time, and the following planes. There we go. God. Now, you also have some options here. Your name views, those are the same ones we talked about already. But the very first one is your document settings. The default is metric millimeters. I highly recommend leaving it in millimeters and metric. If you just vehemently oppose metric, more power to you. Just mouse over, left click the little note and pad, and you can bring it to imperial, to inches and feet and all that kind of fun. But most all 3D printers, the default language or the default dimensions is millimeters. Now this has gotten a lot better, but often there can be scale translation issues and such. So if you make something in inches and then you bring it to the slicer for a 3D printer, it's automatically going to try to translate it to metric. Sometimes that throws the scale way off. So I'd recommend just leaving it in metric. Plus, that way you don't have to remember what the translation of from fractional to decimal is, and you can just use decimal because it's metric. We have rulers that have both inches and metric. So if you just kind of don't have it in your head, you can keep a ruler in front of you and see, all right, so many inches is about so many millimeters, and there you go. So that's an option for you. Okay. Those are the main things. The main tools we're going to be using are going to be, for the moment, for this project, are going to be Create Sketch and Extrude. So just to give you a quick rundown, Create Sketch, click that, creates a sketch, obviously. You have to pick the plane. I recommend the XY plane, so it's like you're working straight down on a tabletop. Select that, view cycles over, so now you're looking straight down. All of your tools have changed. These are all your sketch tools. Anything you create based on the origin, it's going to lock it in place. So depending on what you're doing, consider that. You have a variety of different line types. You have your straight lines and arcs, and hotkey is L. As it says here, lines it just creates lines, a continuous line. Select there, I can click from anywhere, and it'll keep making stuff, and I can just kind of sort of make things. You can see you have an angle base, which is relative to the last line, and you have a length dimension. Press tab to toggle between if you want to actually set the number of either the distance. So that should be 14. Little gold lock comes in place, that locks it in place. If I want to actually set the angle, 143, let's make that 145. Same thing happens, little lock comes in place. Hit enter, finishes the line. Now those dimensions are those dimensions, both the length and the arc is locked. I can still move stuff around. So I can click and drag this line. you see that it grows and shrinks, but the connecting line stays the same path on the same vector. If I click and drag the vertex, now everything moves around. I can drag that up and over. Now it locks it together. Do you see the difference there? When this was open, when these two lines did not connect, same color through and through. But when I close that, now when I mouse over, this inside interior area is light blue. The outside edges become black. That is a closed sketch. That is something I could then extrude. So if you want to eventually, what we're going to be doing, extrude stuff, it has to be a closed sketch for the most part. I'm going to explain that also later. You have a variety of different stuffs. Obviously, you have rectangles, you have circles, you have ellipses, you have curved lines, and you have mirror. You also have some modifiers like making patterns, making multiples. You can mirror those. You can also alter your toolbar because, like, I hate that the center rectangle is not by the 2-point rectangle. You can click and drag and move the tools around. The create is a drop down. This allows you to see the same thing. And if you mouse over, you now see all the other options. Also, if you mouse over any of these, you'll see this little vertical ellipses come up. Click on that, and it allows you to pin these to either the toolbar, which is at the top, or the shortcuts key. You can do both if you want. It added it to the top. Take it away, uncheck. Press S, brings up your sketch shortcuts, but it's also your search bar. So if I didn't know where the rectangle was, I start typing that in, and you get a bunch of options. So there you go. Other stuffs, again, like I said, there's a whole bunch of this. 2-point rectangle just means you start at one, you draw it out, create the other corner. What if I don't like, oh crap, I meant to make that a certain size? Double click that, doesn't do anything. It selects the whole thing. But if you want to change that size by actual numeric value, go to the sketch dimension tool. Select that, select one line, drags up, click. Now you can input that numerically. Let's say that should have been 41. Resizes everything. Same thing goes for any other stuff. You know, you make a circle, any of that. Center point circle draws out the circle based on diameter. There you go. You want to make a change to that dimension, select the outside circle. It brings up your dimension tool. You could also drag it outwards if you want to put the dimension out there. There you go. 39 point lots and lots and lots. Let's say it should be 40. There you go. Hit escape, gets out of that. You have a variety of different tools here. I implore you to just click and play. Some of your modifiers here, you have fillet, like I said, makes a pointy corner round. Select a fillet one side, two side, you see the little red line come up. You can drag across and you can see where the point begins for the inscribing circle, or you can type it in numerically. As things get more complex as you're modeling, I highly recommend using the numeric input, not dragging, because sometimes your mouse can kind of jump a little bit, and all of a sudden, because this is a parametric modeling system, meaning that you make changes and it's going to recalculate stuff. If you make big change to a really complex thing, it can really bog down your computer. So if you just type in, I just wanted it to be 12, it's going to go right to it. So there you go. But if you do not hit enter yet, and you can continue to click around, each one of these radii will be based on a 12 millimeter change. Hit enter, locks it in place. Now, you also have a couple of things. Trim works based off of an intersecting line. So maybe I wanted to chop all that off. And just draw a line across. Fusion functions off of anything it can see, meaning that if it is existing, now I didn't make any changes, I didn't trim anything, but now when I mouse over, I put that line across, now it automatically segments those two sides of that amorphous shape into two different sections. So I can now select them independently of one another. Or press shift and hold shift and click on both and you can get the whole thing. If you're trying to select a whole perimeter, double click on that perimeter and it'll select the whole thing. Trim works based off of, again, having an intersecting line. So if I select trim, or press T. Now it's going to base still, it's not going to chain all the selections. It's just going to be each segment. But because I got that line there, I can chop stuff away. You're going to get an error because constraints were changed and da 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 da. I'm going to explain what that means in a moment. You got a bunch of other options in there too. What if you made a line that you really wanted it to go all the way to that other section, or you trimmed the wrong thing away? Down in modify, there's a bunch more. Chamfer's also there. One of the other ones that's really handy is extend. I trimmed that away intentionally, but what if I had drawn that way, but I actually would really like that line to extend all the way, but only to the next section. You can keep going. Now, the problem is this extend, it's based off of what the previous line is. And the previous line that was right there was a curved line. So it's going to keep that curve based on that radius and keep moving it along until it meets another intersecting line. So neat stuff there. I do not expect you to absorb all of this in one go. This is a lot, but I'm just wanting to impress upon you that there are a lot of options. One of the other commonly used tools here is offset. This, as it says, copies the original sketch, and you base a distance away from that, and it's going to copy that line. So what does that mean? Lots of words. I can select offset, and this section here, I can drag or numerically input how far away I want this to be. This is really handy for making double-walled things or things that are extensions off of the one base. Meaning, it's not a direct copy and paste of that line. Look as the line changes as it moves further away. It gets wider and change, or going the other way, keep making it smaller, make it too small, and it's going to lose all definition. But that's the whole point. You're making an offset. It is based relative to the line you have selected. It's not just a copy and paste. If you want to copy and paste, just copy and paste. One of the last ones is copy and paste. So the move tool, copy and paste, it's one of the same. Press M if you want, or the arrow key. You select what you want. So, and one of the things, you can also select where it's moving from, any of that sort. You can select independently, or if you need to, you have your two selection box options. If you click and drag from the left, dragging right, the blue box in orange, it will only select what is completely within the box. So those lines were, but the whole thing wasn't. If you drag and select, or select and drag from the right moving left, blue dotted line with yellow inside, it will select everything that box touches. Now, that wasn't the whole thing, so it's selecting just chunks of that line. That's a selection box. To move, because I got a whole bunch here, you have your options here. You have your orthogonal moves, the lines here, or the arrows, just left and right along the X, just up and down along the Y. Now look that I didn't select the entire box there. It is dragging and recalculating that rectangle. So that's one of the things about this that works really nicely. You have pan, which is just the box there. You can move in both directions. You also have an orbit tool, and that's going to do some really funky things because these also weren't selected. So it's going to keep warping things based off of around what you have selected only. So that is one of the things. If you want to move a whole thing, select the whole thing. Now let it recalculate all the stuff. All right, it just backed out of it. And copy and paste is just literally that. Let me select all the things. If I don't want all of those, get out of it. Just double click along that box. It selects the whole thing. Control or Command if you're on Mac. Control C, Control V. There you go. Brings up a copy. Whoop. There you are. All right. So the other thing I want to talk about, we're not going to go over all of it because there's a lot to it, are constraints. All these funny little symbols floating around your drawing, those are constraints. And what that is it just lets you free draw things like that. And then if you want to make things architectural, it'll snap them in place for you. And what do I mean by that? So let's just draw something with a fit point spline. We haven't used this yet. Whereas lines are based on straight lines from vertex to vertex, straight line moving along. A fit point spline draws a curved line based on multiple points. So between 2 points, it's one straight line. But as soon as I start moving and adding a third point, it's going to start curving. May hit enter. That finishes it. You have these what are called handlebars, these green lines here. You can click and drag the ends. If you bring them closer, it shrinks the line. If you rotate it, it twists the line. This is all based around circular geometry. You can also still click and drag and move these points all over the place. But that's for making freeform lines. If I want to, and I can still make some of these parts constrained, but what if I am just kind of drawing a general shape, like I was doing before there, but I can't quite get that to 90 degrees. It will snap into 90 degrees, but for the sake of conversation, it's close enough there. All right. That is directly straight up and down. It is showing the symbol for horizontal vertical. All right. So that one is horizontal vertical. It's already there. If I click that, it's going to give me an error. Okay, great. But I'm going to hold that, or I'm going to click that, not hit escape. But what if I wanted that line to also be vertical? Click it. I have the constraint active. It snaps that line to be vertical. It's going to snap it to the closest option, meaning it's not going to make this one vertical. It's going to make that one horizontal. Same thing goes for this angle here. What if it was real close to being 90 and perpendicular, but it wasn't quite there? Coincident, oops, will allow you to do some of that. And I'm not doing it right. All right, won't let me do that. That's okay. All right. Move around like tangent. Say I'm making a line here, going across a circle. It's real close, but it's going to mess with it. I can't quite get it. I can't quite figure out what would be the best angle for that line to be come straight off as a tangent. Select tangent. You select the line first, then the circle that it's relative to. That's often the case with Fusion. What you select first is what will move, and what you select second is what it's referencing, what it'll move against, what it'll move to. Snap that, snaps in place. There you go. Equal makes sense. If you want something to be equal distant, select that one and that one. It's going to snap them to be the same. First one was the one that it was basing it off of. The second one snapped to the same length. Parallel makes them parallel. Perpendicular, that was the one I was looking for before. Obviously makes it perpendicular. Fix and unfix just locks that one in place. Midpoint is if you're trying to draw a line, maybe I'm trying to start a line, but I want to make sure that's actually in the middle of, sorry, excuse me, it's between these 2 points. As I mouse around, you'll see this, my crosshairs change. It'll go from this square with, or this crosshair with a box around it. That's just letting me snap to any point on the grid. But as soon as I mouse over a line, it switches to a blue X. It's going to lock to that line somewhere. But as I move my mouse down, whoop, see that triangle pop up? That is smack between the 2 endpoints. If I wasn't sure where it was going to be, just drew that out there. Select midpoint, select that first line, select there. Oh, it's not letting me do it. All right, well, I should have snapped it to the point before. Fine. And it's not letting me do it now. Well, there you go. See, I should have done it right the first time. Fine. Draw my line, find the midpoint. There it is. Draw it out there. So there you go. Concentric is just an easy way to make a couple of circles concentric. Also, if it's a circle, you can just find the point, midpoint, or the center point, draw it out there. Other thing, if you are making circles, anything like that, really easy to do, use the offset tool. If I want to keep making circles that are based around that first one, use the offset, and it's going to move. It's not, but the only difference is this circle is not 15.8 millimeters in diameter. It is 15.8 millimeters away from that circle. So if I hit there you go. See the distance between there? The actual dimension I'm gonna be able to select that by using the dimension tool. It's actually 71.6 yada yada. Yeah, I know. It's all right. Crate driven just means it has multiple points. But if I want to change that, it's not going to let me because it is multiple points driven. So you make that dimension. That's there. You make that decision on stuff like that. If it's relative to something else, use the offset tools. But if you want it to be specific based on a true number, draw it concentric. So there's a whole bunch of stuff to learn. I don't expect you to learn all this stuff right off the bat. But the main thing is I've done all of this stuff. Nothing has changed. In order to, if I to take this and modify it into like extruding this or do anything else with all these sketches, last thing you got to do, hit finish sketch. That closes up that sketch tool, locks it in your time slider. Now you have another folder has appeared on your project tree, sketch 2. That's all that gibberish I just did. And now I can move to extruding and things like that. Now, if you are drawing something that you are going to extrude or something like that, it all needs to be on the same sketch. But if you're going to make different levels and things like that, it could be different sketches. But what I mean by that is, you see all these closed sketches, meaning they're light blue inside, the ones that are not light blue, if I wanted to extrude those, I need to close that sketch. In order to do that, you need to go back and alter your sketch. So either right-click on the time slider object, or over here, right-click, just go to Edit Sketch, brings you right back. So something like this, the reason this isn't blue is because that's not touching. I could say like use the Extend But tool, and now it closes that. There you go. Finish sketch, come back out, now I can play with that. Main thing is, don't make a whole bunch of sketches with a bunch of partial lines. You need to go back, edit sketch, and complete that completed sketch before you move on. All right, so that's a really quick rundown of the general interface, the sketch tool specifically, and some of the constraints and stuff and line tools and stuff with that. Play around with those, familiarize yourself with some of them, start to get familiar with them. Main thing is make a sketch, lines make lines, fit point splines make curved lines or amorphous lines, and you have your variety of circles and rectangles and triangles and anything in between. Constrain them allows you to freehand some stuff and then lock it in place later or make changes with a dimension tool, things like that. But there's a lot to learn. I don't expect you to learn everything right off the bat, but that's a general walkthrough of the interface. So let's pause there and come back.